And then I heard this one track by him called Traveling Alone, which is the first track on the album that I thought was like nothing else he'd ever done.
For decades, Eric Clapton has been a living legend, the guitar god whose riffs have shaped rock history and whose songs have touched millions. Fans have speculated endlessly about what influenced him, which albums inspired him, and which records he keeps close to his heart. But until now, Clapton has never revealed the full truth. At 80 years old, after a lifetime of music, struggles, triumphs, and personal battles, he has finally opened up about the albums that shaped not only his career, but his very soul. And what he named will surprise you. This isn't just a list of popular records or chart toppers. These are albums that moved him, challenged him, and defined the way he approaches music to this day. From raw blues to classic rock, from hidden gems to iconic masterpieces, each choice tells a story of late nights in smoky clubs, of inspiration drawn from the greatest musicians of all time, and of moments where music became a lifeline during some of the darkest times in his life. For fans of Clapton, this is a window into his mind, his influences, and the soundtrack of a life that has known both heartbreak and glory. But the real shock comes not just from the albums themselves, but the order, the omissions, and the reasons behind each selection. Clapton doesn't just list albums. He explains why they mattered, why they shaped his guitar playing, and why, even after decades of creating legendary music himself, these records continue to hold him in awe. For anyone who has followed his journey, this revelation is a rare, intimate glimpse into the heart of a musician who has seen it all, played it all, and survived it all, and now, for the first time, the man himself is speaking. And the list will change the way you hear rock music forever. Even before he revealed his personal list of favorite rock albums, Eric Clapton's life was a tapestry of music, passion, and hardship that few could truly understand. Growing up, he was surrounded by records that spoke to him in ways words never could. Blues records from Muddy Waters and B.B. King were more than entertainment. They were lessons, guides for a young guitarist trying to find his own voice. Clapton often said that listening to those albums felt like entering another world, a place where the guitar could cry, sing, and speak directly to the soul. Each chord, each note, each carefully crafted melody taught him something about feeling, about patience, and about the power of restraint. These early influences formed the foundation not just of his career, but of his emotional connection to music. A connection that would later define his choices when asked about his 10 favorite albums. What makes Clapton's list so compelling isn't just the nostalgia or the technical skill displayed in these records. It's the personal narrative embedded in each choice. Some albums reminded him of his earliest struggles, nights spent alone in his bedroom, strumming guitar after guitar, trying to emulate the sounds that had first captivated him. Others reflected moments of triumph, when he finally felt confident in his talent and began recording hits that would cement his legacy. Every album is in his life story, a mirror reflecting both triumphs and setbacks, joys and sorrows, love and loss. Clapton's passion for music isn't casual. It's almost spiritual. When he speaks about these albums, it's as though he is speaking about companions, teachers, and friends who have accompanied him through the highs and lows of a life lived in sound. Even within the Beatles' catalog, the Rolling Stones' blues-influenced works, and the fiery British rock of the late 60s, Clapton found inspiration that he would carry into every project. His guitar solos, phrasing, and even his songwriting bear the fingerprints of these early loves. But there's more to the story than influence. These albums shaped his understanding of emotion, timing, and musical storytelling. For Clapton, the technical brilliance of a record is secondary to how it moves him, how it makes him feel alive, and how it reminds him of the struggles he has faced and the resilience he has discovered. And, while many might expect that Clapton's favorites are the albums that made him famous or that showcased his own technical prowess, the truth is far more revealing. Some of the records he treasures are obscure, forgotten by mainstream audiences, yet monumental to his personal journey. These are albums that taught him humility, patience, and the depth of feeling that music can carry. Lessons that informed everything from his early Yardbirds performances to his solo career, from his heartbreaks to his legendary comeback tours. When Clapton finally shared the first few entries of his top 10 list, fans and critics alike were stunned. It wasn't just the obvious choices that appeared. It was the reasoning behind them. He spoke not as a legendary guitarist or a famous musician, but as a listener, a fan, and a man who has lived the highs and lows that only life in music can bring. Each record represents more than notes and melodies. It embodies stories, memories, and emotional truths that remain with him even now, decades later. For anyone who wants to understand Eric Clapton beyond the fame, beyond the awards, and beyond the headline performances, his list of 10 favorite rock albums is more than just a selection of records. It is a journey through a lifetime of music, heartache, inspiration, and relentless devotion to the guitar and the songs that shape the soul. And as Clapton revealed his first few picks, it became clear, this isn't just a list. It's an intimate portrait of a man who has lived, loved, lost, and played with more depth than most can imagine. As Clapton moved through the decades, the albums that shaped him continued to serve as guiding lights, even during the darkest moments of his life. The blues records he had grown up with weren't just instructional. They were lifelines, offering comfort and understanding when words failed. Each riff, each bend, each slide on the guitar seemed to echo lessons about resilience, patience, and emotion. These were not merely songs to him. They were companions, mirrors reflecting his own struggles and triumphs. In the quiet hours of the night, when fame felt isolating and personal challenges weighed heavily, Clapton often returned to these albums, replaying them until the world faded away, leaving only the raw power of music and the clarity it brought. It was during these years that Clapton's understanding of music deepened. The records he admired weren't just about technical skill. They conveyed emotion, storytelling, and authenticity. A note played with perfect precision, but no feeling was nothing to him. What mattered was the soul behind the sound, the humanity woven into each chord. Albums from legends like B.B. King, Freddie King, and early Cream recordings taught him that the essence of great music lay in expressing what could not be said with words. Clapton internalized this, absorbing it into his own playing, allowing it to influence not just his technique, but the very way he approached life and art. But Clapton's journey wasn't without its heartbreak. His personal struggles, addiction, loss, and public scrutiny often made him question his own abilities and purpose. And yet, it was precisely these moments that made his favorite albums resonate even more. They reminded him that pain could be transformed into expression, that suffering could give rise to something transcendent, and that music was both a refuge and a teacher. Every album he returned to in those moments carried stories of resilience and survival, lessons about how to endure, adapt, and still create something beautiful. Even as rock evolved and new generations of musicians emerged, Clapton never abandoned the records that had molded him. While younger artists experimented with new sounds and technologies, he remained grounded in the classics that had first inspired him. The raw honesty of blues, the storytelling of early rock, and the experimental daring of 60s and 70s records continued to influence the way he played, the notes he chose, and the phrasing he preferred. For Clapton, these albums weren't relics of the past. They were living guides, constantly reminding him of the principles that had guided him to mastery. When he finally spoke publicly about his top 10 albums, the world was taken aback by some of the selections. While fans expected iconic hits or albums that mirrored his own success, he instead highlighted records that had touched him on a deeply personal level, albums that few outside his inner circle would have guessed. Each choice was deliberate, a reflection not of fame, but of influence, emotion, and the enduring lessons that shaped a life spent chasing the perfect sound. This list was more than nostalgia. It was a map of Clapton's inner world. Every album represented a moment, a mentor, a memory, or a turning point. Some were quiet and understated, while others were fiery and revolutionary. Together, they told a story of passion, struggle, devotion, and the relentless pursuit of expression. To understand Clapton's top 10 albums is to understand the man himself, the triumphs, the heartbreak, the obsessions, and the enduring love for music that has defined a lifetime. And in revealing even part of this list, Clapton gave fans more than a collection of records. He gave them a glimpse into the heart of a musician who has lived through the heights of fame and the depths of despair, and who has always found solace, guidance, and inspiration in the albums that mattered most to him. As Clapton reflected on his journey through music, he often emphasized that these favorite albums weren't chosen lightly. They were albums that had shaped his understanding of rhythm, melody, and the power of expression. Some were records he first heard in dimly lit clubs or dusty record stores, where the sounds seemed to vibrate through him in ways nothing else could. Others were albums that he had listened to late at night in solitude, the notes echoing through his small apartment as he wrestled with personal demons and doubts. Each record became a companion in his journey, providing comfort, instruction, and inspiration when the world felt heavy or indifferent. What made Clapton's list so revealing was the way it showcased his evolution, not just as a guitarist but as a human being. Some albums reflected his earliest loves, the raw, emotional blues that taught him the language of the guitar and how to make it speak for him. Others highlighted moments of experimentation and risk, when artists dared to break conventions and challenge the listener, teaching Clapton that music could be fearless, bold, and transformative. These were records that forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about song structure, technique, and emotion. They reminded him that growth as an artist is never linear. It is a constant dialogue between the past and the present, between mastery and humility. Clapton's personal connection to these albums was not always visible to fans. While the world celebrated his hits and admired his skill, few knew how deeply he internalized the music that influenced him. He often spoke about the emotional lessons he learned from each album, the subtle ways a guitar could cry, the honesty in a singer's voice, the courage to bare one's soul through sound. These records were more than entertainment. They were a blueprint for navigating both music and life. Each chord progression, lyric, and rhythm held a lesson he carried into his performances, recordings, and collaborations. Some albums on his list were surprises, not because they were obscure, but because they revealed sides of Clapton that fans rarely glimpsed. He chose records not for their fame, but for the impact they had on his perspective, his emotional growth, and his ability to create music that resonated beyond the technical. These selections reflected his humility as a musician, showing that even a legend can remain a student of the art he loves. They were reminders that influence is a lifelong process, and that the music which shaped him decades ago still had the power to inspire, guide, and teach. By sharing these choices, Clapton invited fans into a rare, intimate space, the world behind the public persona. Behind the sold-out tours and iconic guitar solos, he revealed the albums that made him feel understood, challenged, and alive. And in doing so, he reminded the world that even a rock legend relies on the guidance of those who came before him. It was a testament to the power of music itself, a force capable of shaping identity, inspiring resilience, and connecting generations. For Clapton, this top 10 list was more than a ranking. It was a personal map of his musical soul. Each album represented a piece of his history, a lesson learned, or a memory held close. It told the story of a man who had witnessed the evolution of rock, endured the highs and lows of fame, and emerged with a perspective grounded in love, respect, and passion for the art form. And through these albums, fans could see not just the guitarist, but the student, the listener, and the human being who had devoted his life to understanding, honoring, and playing music in its most authentic form. In the final reflection on his top 10 albums, Eric Clapton made it clear that these records were not simply a celebration of music he enjoyed. They were milestones of his life. Each album represented a period, a lesson, or an emotional turning point. Some reminded him of nights spent practicing alone, fingers aching, trying to replicate the sounds that first captivated him. Others reminded him of collaborations, friendships, and the moments of creative magic that could only happen when inspiration struck at the right time. Through these selections, Clapton painted a portrait of himself not as an untouchable rock legend, but as a lifelong student of music, continually learning, absorbing, and growing. The albums also revealed a side of Clapton that few outsiders ever see, the vulnerability behind the virtuosity. While audiences focused on his skill and his iconic solos, he focused on the lessons embedded in the music of others. He revered honesty over perfection, feeling over technical prowess. To him, A record that moved him emotionally mattered more than one that simply showcased talent. And that perspective is what allowed him to remain grounded, even as fame, fortune, and accolades accumulated over decades. These albums reminded him of the essence of why he began playing music in the first place: to connect, to feel, and to communicate what words alone could never express. Some of the choices were unexpected, reflecting Clapton's eclectic taste and his willingness to value emotion over popularity. While some records were celebrated classics, others were hidden gems, albums that few knew but that resonated profoundly with him. He explained how each one influenced his guitar playing, his songwriting, or his understanding of rhythm and phrasing. These selections were less about ranking and more about storytelling, a personal journey through decades of music that shaped him into the artist and person he became, revealing. These favorites at age 80 was also a reflection of a life lived fully, with all its joys and sorrows. Clapton had endured heartbreak, addiction, and the pressures of fame, yet he remained devoted to the art that had carried him through it all. By sharing these albums, he offered fans not just insight into his influences, but a roadmap of resilience, passion, and lifelong curiosity. The albums that inspired him in youth still held power decades later, proving that great music transcends time and circumstance. Ultimately, Clapton's list is a testament to the enduring power of music to teach, heal, and inspire. It is a reminder that even the greatest artists remain students at heart, continuously shaped by the sounds that touch their souls. These 10 albums are more than records. They are companions, mentors, and mirrors, reflecting the life of a man who has given so much to the world through his music. And for fans, they offer a rare glimpse into the heart of Eric Clapton, a musician who listens, learns, and cherishes the legacy of those who came before him, even as he continues to leave his own indelible mark on rock history. For anyone seeking to understand Eric Clapton beyond his fame, his guitar, and his legendary career, this list is essential. It is a journey through the music that defined him, the albums that challenged him, and the sounds that inspired a lifetime of creativity. At 80 years old, by finally naming these 10 records, Clapton invites us to not just witness his journey, but to feel it, understand it, and appreciate the lifelong conversation between an artist and the music that shaped him.